got very tail happy.
Yeah, the track is shaping up somewhat like you see on a World of Outlaws or on a dirt oval. You have a groove in there. Once you get off the line, you get into what we call the marbles, and it really can be scary for some of these guys.
Look at the speed through the picnic grounds in the Chevrolet Speed Trap, 109 miles an hour, and look at him hanging out.
He's really pushing up against what we call the cushion there, trying to stay on the edge of that line without getting out into that loose stuff.
But here was his first big mistake as he got too hot into the corner and spun the vehicle, and that would cost him dearly. Now remember, he timed at 5:07 in qualifying. That was his quick time. But here he is at the same point at Glen Cove at 5:16, so that cost him about 9 seconds.
And sometimes what happens when you make a mistake like that and you spin like that, sometimes, especially Robbie, he knows it's going to be a tough battle with Leonard Baschholz. I know at this point on, he was really, really pushing here. As he comes up to this turn, watch what happens here. He's still pushing, and he spins it once again. So effectively, all his chance for victory has basically gone out the window here.
And not only did he spin, he stalled the motor, and that really did take all chance of him winning the division. The only way he would have a chance from this point on would be if Leonard Baschholz ran his truck right off the race course or broke.
And that's why he's keeping on running, because he doesn't know what Leonard's going to do. He thinks he still has a chance. Look, he's really hanging it out here. He's leaving nothing in the bag right here.
One of the interesting things that happened this year at the hill climb was the introduction of a sky paging system that would allow us to keep track of each of the vehicles as they completed each of their runs. Now, Bart was at the top of the mountain. In the past, he would never know what was going on. Now he does.
One of the new additions to the 1994 Pikes Peak Hill Climb is an advanced timing and scoring system. In years past, when the cars pulled in here, a lot of times they had to wait hours, sometimes even until they got to the bottom of the hill before they knew what their times were. Now, with this Westlink system right here, it pages you instantly or almost instantly within a minute, tells you what the time is. You push a button right here. It tells you the car number. Then it tells you the time. You're able to scroll through there and find the last several times, and you can go up to the driver when he's still in the car, and you can actually give him his time so he knows how he did. A big advancement over years past.
Back on board with Robbie Unser, just a few turns remaining till he reaches the summit. He knows that Leonard Baschholz has the door wide open and that his chances of victory are slim and none.
Yeah, Leonard, I'm sure, is licking his chops at this point. I think he knows, or he knew, what he had to beat as he headed up the mountain. And we see right here that Robbie is really not even close to last year's record.
The mark set last year by Baschholz at 11:47.22, and Robbie over 12 minutes to cross the finish line. And back at the starting line, Leonard Baschholz knows he's got at least one division in hand. All he's got to do is make it to the top. We'll take a look at his run next at the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb. Stay with us. Marty Reed and Bart Kendall back with you with some of the thousands that come to this race each year, July 4th. Bart's at the top of the mountain with Robbie Unser.
Here is Robbie Unser. We just got the time. You're at a 12:01.22, so it's a few 13 seconds. How'd the run go for you?
Yeah, it was a lot looser than I thought it was. I think the headers fell off like the one of the first straightaways, and the engine started blubbering a little bit, and I looped it twice. So
for spinning twice, I guess that's not
it's not. Unfortunately, it wasn't as good as I'd like to have seen. The road was loose. We elected to go first. I think that probably was the wrong thing to do now that I've been up. You know, we're happy to be up here, and special thanks to ADT and Chevrolet and Mike Richardson, Bob McDivitt, and Nick Peluso who've come up here and had faith in me to do this deal, and it's quite possible we could get beat in the truck the first one up here, but I've had better runs.
Well, we'll look for you in the open wheel.
Yeah, we'll be up in the open wheel, and you know, who knows, if the road was way looser than I thought, and if it stays like that, it's going to be tough for anybody to get up. So
let's show you some of the other competitors in Super Truck. This was Davey Schmidt's run. He qualified 5th at 6:21.18. Did not have the horses to compete with Baschholz and Robbie Unser. He would cross the finish line in 14 minutes, 44.51 seconds.
Another fellow who had a really good run here, considering the equipment he had, was Greg Stinger. He qualified at 6:23.85, but on race day he went much quicker. He ended up with a final time of 14:11.44, and I think Greg would also be a guy to admit that he's not going to beat Baschholz and Unser, but he's having a good time. He's getting experience, and who knows, in a year or two, he might be competing for the overall crowd.
And then Dean Burling, who qualified 4th at 5:59.66. did a very fine job. He would turn in the third fastest time in Super Truck at 13:36.02, but that would still be well off the pace of both Unser and Baschholz. And speaking of Leonard, he knew what he had to do to win his second Super Truck title, to go with his 7 stock titles. All he had to do was stay clean. From Woodland Park, Colorado, in a brand new Ford Bronco, Leonard Baschholz was literally in the driver's seat.
He was. You can see right from the start he had the thing hung out. He really is aggressive, and I think Leonard really wants to run the first half very strong and maybe give himself a little margin for error at the top.
Now, he was the second quickest in qualifying, about 4 seconds slower than Robbie Unser. But look at the speed, very comparable up through the halfway picnic grounds.
Yeah, one thing about qualifying, they only qualify on a portion of the racetrack. They never run the whole track in qualifying, so sometimes qualifying can be a little misleading. I know Leonard thought he had a good battle going on with Robbie, but I think he knew he had something in reserve as he got to the top of the hill.
And as we see, the split time definitely quicker than Robbie Unser. And remember that Robbie had spun once at this point halfway through the race. As we move up past the tree line and heading for nothing but blue skies, Leonard Baschholz was in control, and he knew it.
But even though he was in control and he looked like he had the race in hand, he still wanted to set a track record. I know that Leonard wants to be the king of the hill here, loves to win. You can see right here, he gets a little sideways here, comes real close to the outside wall. So I think he's not going to be satisfied with just winning. He wants a new truck record.
As he makes his way through the W's, you can see this Ford Bronco. Now, notice the race line. And every time that one of these Super Trucks got out of the race line, that's when they would find themselves getting into trouble.
You can see how sideways they got there. You can see it from the in-car. You can see it from the up-above shot there. They get off that groove there. They get out in the marbles. You can see right there, it is a handful for the drivers.
Right there, he had trouble braking. He got so deep into the corner. So at this point, Leonard Baschholz, and this is what a lot of the drivers were saying after their runs was, by golly, if you come off that race line at all, you've got your hands full. Coming up to the top section of the W's now, Leonard at this point has not spun, and he's come close a couple of times to the edge, but still well in control. And now it was a matter of would he get the record. And look at the way he manhandles that Bronco around the corner.
Yeah, you talk about the track and how you're getting off the line. It might be kind of dangerous. I spoke with Roger Mears, a veteran who I'm sure most of you have heard of, who's been up this mountain many times before. He said the track was one of the scarier tracks he's ever seen here. And coming from him, that's something.
Well, you can see Leonard Baschholz just sit back and enjoy the ride.
Marty, right there. You hear the truck kind of hesitate right there. He came in really deep. He got off it, and I think the clutch wasn't fully disengaged, and then once again he had trouble.
But look at the time as he crosses the finish line. Despite the bobbles, 11:36.63, a new record. And Leonard did not have time to even talk to you, Bart, because he had to race back down the mountain. He got a ride with Robbie Unser in the helicopter, and the two of them made it back to compete. Leonard in stock and Robbie in open wheel. And here were the final times. Leonard Baschholz with a new Super Truck record, second year in a row that he's claimed the crown. Robbie Unser 24.59 seconds behind. Dean Burling, Greg Stingray, and Davey Schmidt round out the top 5. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll be back at the starting line at the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb. With you at the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb, and as you can see, both Robbie Unser and Leonard Baschholz have made their way back down to the starting line. Now, if you've been with us in years past, you know we've talked about the air density, the fact the higher you climb, the thinner the air. It has great effects on both motors and on tires. Here's Bart.
Every year at Pikes Peak, much of the talk centers around what effect the change in altitude or atmospheric pressure will have on the car's performance as they race from the base to the summit here at Pikes Peak. This balloon might help you visualize what I'm talking about. We put a tape measure around the circumference of the balloon. It measures 26 inches now. Let's go up to the halfway point at Glen Cove and see what that does to this balloon. Well, I've made my way up to Glen Cove, the halfway point, which is about 2,500 feet higher than when we started. Let's see what effect the change in altitude has had on this balloon. With the tape measure around, we see it measures almost 27 inches, which is about an inch wider than it was when we started. What's happening here is the air in the balloon is thicker or heavier than the air outside the balloon. This will have 3 effects on the vehicles as they race to the top. 1, on the fuel-air mixture that goes into the engines. 2, on the air being forced into the radiators to cool the motors. And 3, probably the most visible and noticeable, is on the tire pressures of the vehicles. Now let's head up to the finish line and see what effect that has when we get to the summit. Well, I finally made it here to the summit at Pikes Peak, and let's see what final result we have on the balloon here. Put the tape measure around, we're at about 27.5 inches, difference of 1.5 inches from when we first started. Imagine this to be a tire. The tires will expand as they race up the mountain. Some tire engineers have told us that they see as much as a 6-pound increase from top to bottom. So next time a driver tells you that the altitude affects the handling of his vehicle, we know he's not full of hot air.
Well, at least now we know we don't have to buy plane tickets for Bart anymore. He's getting around a lot quicker. Moving into stock division, this is Lynn Cowan as he pulls to the starting line. And Bart, explain what stock's all about.
Well, stock to many people is one of the most exciting one up the mountain, and for good reason. These are heavy, metal-bodied cars with a lot of horsepower.
The original body's about the only thing that is stock on these vehicles. Now, here is Roger Mears. First time in a long time that he has been back in a stock car. He did not make a qualifying attempt because he was racing a desert event in Barstow, California. So he was first out of the box, and he would end up crossing the finish line at 12:07.76.
Here's a look at Robert Mankaville as he is heading through, and here is bottomless pit, and look what happened to Robert. That is not a place you want to go off. He was fortunate there, just hit the bank and came to a stop.
A little further, and he would have been 5,000 feet straight down to Manitou Springs. Now, this is Lynn Cowan on the course. He qualified fourth at 5:27.44, and Cowan, on a very good run, manages to cross the line at 12 minutes, 0.30 seconds. And that sets the stage for the final 3 to make their way up the mountain. The first of those 3 will be Roger Warden. He'll be in the 94 Ford. He's from Independence, Missouri. And the true spirit of what a gentleman racer is all about, as he qualified third at 5:23.40 seconds. This was an interesting run for Roger Warden up this mountain.
It was. Going into the run, I think he knows, or he knew, that several drivers hadn't finished. We had 7 stock cars that didn't even make it to the top. So right now, they're thinking, if I just make it to the top, I got a good chance at winning this thing.
Back at the starting line, Leonard Vaschholz, the only man in history, as he takes an ice cube into his mouth, the only man in history to win 2 divisions the same year. And Leonard has already denied Robbie Unser the chance to repeat that feat as the Woodland Park, Colorado native makes his run in stock. And, you know, he may end up being the only man ever to win 2 divisions in the same year.
I know he wants to do it again this year, but because of a possible rule change, actually a safety issue, the organizers here want to eliminate helicopters flying drivers back and forth, so they might have to choose to pick their favorite class, only compete in that class.
So as we make our way to the halfway picnic grounds, Roger Warden at 106 miles an hour in his stock Ford. As I said, there's not much stock on this thing except the body.
We can see as they're coming around the corner, you see how the drivers really hang the back end out. And now we take a look at Bobby Register. He was the quickest qualifier. He knows he's got a good chance of winning this.
262 cubic inches of Chevy power. Bobby Register from Florissant, Colorado, the #1 qualifier. And after Robbie Unser's debacle of going first, and that's what the top qualifier has. He has a choice of going first or last. No one the remainder of the day will choose to go first.
I think everyone looked at that and said, oh my God, what is Robbie doing? And if it worked, you might have seen people change their plans. It didn't work for Robbie, so I think you see Bobby doing the traditional thing, that is going last.
And remember, look at how he gets off the race line right there and almost drops a wheel off. And that was the other problem. The race course, if you came off the line, as we've talked about several times at this point, you see Leonard Vaschholz coming up, and again, 109 miles an hour through the speed trap. If you got offline, you were in trouble.
Yeah, you got offline, you became more of a passenger. You're just hanging on there, trying not to go off. You really can't be aggressive with the throttle, and that's what happened there.
Approaching the halfway mark at Glen Cove, Roger Warden, the time to beat on the left is Lynn Cowan's, and yes, Roger was just barely quicker. And amazing when you think about the fact he has the use of only one eye. He lost the sight in his left eye, and it greatly affects depth perception. If you don't believe me, try it yourself. Now, there's one other interesting note about Roger Warden. He wants to beat his competition on the racetrack, so much so that he loaned a carburetor to Bobby Register.
The carburetor deal, Bobby came up to me at 16 Mile, and his car hadn't been running very good because not too many people can build alcohol carburetors. And CNS Specialties is good. I had a spare one. I gave it to him because if I want to beat somebody, I want to beat them running their best, not because their car's not running right. That's not winning. That's just finishing first.
Take a look at the course map. You can see where Roger Warden is just approaching the W's. Leonard Vascholtz near Glen Cove, and Bobby Register heading for the ski area. In fact, here comes Register, halfway picnic grounds, the Chevrolet speed trap, and he's slower at this point, which was a bit surprising.
Yeah, with the quickest time and Roger Warden's carburetor, he was a little bit slower, but at the top of the mountain, he really picked up things.
Now heading for Glen Cove, the split time on the left. That is Roger Warden's time, and look at Leonard Vascholtz, under it by over 4 seconds. So Vascholtz at this point on the race course was in control once again, looking to make it 2 in a row for 2 years in a row. Stay with us. We'll show you the finish of stock right after this. Pikes Peak, Auto Hill Climb, Marty Reed along with Bart Kendall, and you can see that Roger Warden is closing in on the finish line. Leonard Vascholtz at the W's, and Bobby Register, here he comes to Glen Cove, and the time to beat on the left is Leonard Vascholtz, and he's going to do it.
Yes, Register is under that by at least 3 seconds right now. He knows, I'm sure he knows he has a good run going right here. You can see he's really hanging it out. I'm sure he not only wants to beat Leonard, he wants an overall record.
As we move our way up to the W's, this is Leonard Vascholtz, and whoa, again, coming awfully close to getting totally off the race line there.
Yeah, you get off that groove as we've talked about, and you can almost see on the edge of the track there's the marbles there, and you can see he really hung it out and had another close call. Here we have back to Roger Warden here, and we see him sliding here real smooth here. But interestingly enough, I talked to Roger after the race. He said his transmission popped out of gear as much as 7 times, and that's very difficult to drive when your transmission's popping out of gear.
And look at the time that he turned in, despite the transmission problem, 12 minutes, 0.06 seconds. At this point, he was the leader in stock division, with 2 cars still on the track, and this being one of them, top qualifier Bobby Register.
Even though Register's in the stock car division, he was a former champion here in open wheel back in 1986, so he really knows this course. You see something hanging off the right fender there as he's heading up the mountain, but that's not slowing him down at all.
Back to Leonard Vascholtz as he was closing in on the finish line. Roger Warden's time was the time to beat, just over 12 minutes. And again, getting it a little sideways right there at the bottomless pit section of the race course.
Anyone else that did that, you might think they're a bit out of control, but Leonard Vascholtz is a 7-time champion in stock car. And here he comes across the finish line. He does have the time to beat, but we still have Bobby Register.
And that was 6 seconds quicker than the record he set here in stock division last year. So could Leonard Vascholtz be claiming his 10th title? 2 in Super Truck and his 8th here in stock division? Well, Bobby Register was going to say, no way today. If he had anything he could pour into it, he was putting it in at this point. The McDonald Chevrolet, owned by J.B. Isaacs, rounded the final turn, and 11:41.12 was the mark, and he did it with 11:39.17 seconds. So Bobby Register in the Chevy, the new stock champion. Second place, Leonard Vascholtz by 1.95 seconds. Roger Warden, Lynn Cowan, and Roger Mears round out the top 5. Bobby talked about his thrilling run with Bart.
I lost most of my brakes once I got up to the W's, so I had to shut down early in a lot of these upper corners because the brakes were just too soft, too hot. And it blubbered a little bit on top because we were a little bit fat, but we had to do that to keep it from being too lean down below. So all in all, the team did a great job. I'm very happy. The J.B. Isaac Chevrolet Motorsports, Lucky Lola's Casino, McDonald's, all my sponsors, Waters Construction, they've been a tremendous help. Best team on the mountain. I'd like to say hello to my wife and my son. They're behind me all the way. Becky and Bobby have just been super support and keeping me dialed in.
This must feel extra special beating a guy like Leonard Vascholtz who's been so strong up here, isn't it?
Oh, it's fun coming back. It's 3 years out, and it's been a long time coming. We're very happy to be back and very happy to where we're at.
A lot more racing action still to come here at the 72nd running of the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb. Don't go away.
Codsworth.
12 minutes, 28.06 seconds, a new record for high-performance showroom stock. Here is a great story. On the very first day of practice, Jeff Swart crashed his Porsche. In the Pikes Peak Open division, he came back, literally rebuilding the car in the basement of his hotel to win in a time of 11 minutes, 53.48 seconds. And then this was one of the most exciting motorcycle races that you will ever see. This is the Open Pro division, and in this first group of 5, we had 3 former champions. Clint Bascholtz on the number 90, the son of Leonard, Brian Anderson, and Arlo Englund. Also in this field, watch for number 58, Davey Durrell of Eden Prairie. And these 5 guys, as they first started off, stayed very close together up through the Glen Cove section. But then by the time we got to the upper level of the course, it became a 2-man race between Davey Durrell and Clint Bascholtz, and they swapped this lead back and forth right up until near the very end, Bart, when Durrell made one mistake.
Yeah, that mistake cost him, and one mistake is enough to cost you. These guys are so evenly matched. They've gone 1-2 the last couple of years.
And the winner in the Pro Open division, Clint Bascholtz, for the 2nd year in a row. And now the tension really begins to build. You can see it on the face of Gary Lee Canoyer in his open wheel racer. What these gentlemen are racing for, not only their division championship, but the overall record. And they, 1920s, there was a trophy, the Penrose Trophy, which signified the winner of the overall for that particular year. The trophy was lost in 1924, but it's been found. This is the Reynolds Museum in Connorsville, Indiana. The museum has had something officials, the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, have been looking for since 1924. The Penrose Trophy, the original symbol of overall victory at the hill climb. And they found Connorsville, or should I say Connorsville found them, by accident.
5 or 6 years ago, I can't tell you who the fellow was, somebody from here in Connorsville happened to be out there, and they were showing him around. He was seeing the exhibits. I've never seen the Pikes Peak Museum, and in the process they told him about the old original Penrose Trophy that was awarded to a Lexington and how it had disappeared. He said it hadn't disappeared. He said it's at the Reynolds Museum in Connorsville.
Ott Loesch drove a Lexington to victory in 1924 and went home to Connorsville with the trophy. The Lexington Car Company ended up going bankrupt, and the trophy ended up in the hands of Alan Jesse Reynolds. There was a period between the mid-40s and 1958 when the city of Connorsville lost the trophy. But one day it turned up at the junior high school, no questions asked. The irony of this story, while Connorsville holds the trophy, the Hill Climb Museum is home to the 1924 Lexington Ott Loesch used to win it. As we get ready for open wheel competition, you're looking at David Donner. He is one exhausted racer. When we come back, we'll tell you the story behind David Donner's effort to conquer the mountain at the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb. Counterparts.
Yes, the aerodynamic restrictions, they have flat-bottom cars, but they're characterized by those huge wings on the back. They're still very lightweight and really the crown jewel of the auto hill climb.
The division and overall record, 10 minutes, 43.63 seconds, and David Donner is just about ready to make his run at this mountain. He is from right here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He is in a car that literally has been rebuilt from the ground up. This is 5 days earlier when he crashed in practice. The throttle stuck wide open. He suffered bruised ribs. A 20G impact measured by the equipment on board tore the race car apart. What did he do? 2 days later, his wife talked him into pulling his brother's race car out of the Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb Museum that had not been run since 1989. They went to work taking the tub from his current race car and rebuilding it completely from the ground up. Just to give you an idea, they had to completely remanufacture a bell housing, transfer most of the engine parts from the newer car back to the older car, and transfer all the old suspension. The irony of all this is that David was climbing into the car that was last driven by his brother up the mountain in 1989. Shortly thereafter, he was killed in a crash.
All we can do is just go back to setups that we've used in past years, and then I'm just going to have to feel the car out in the first 3 turns, basically not pushing it that hard, and just see what it wants to do, and hopefully there aren't any mechanical problems, and then just sort of work into it. It's not, you know, I'm not going to go forward to the wall, you know, the first turn, so it's more of a, I need to finish today.
Well, David's being rather modest there. He says he's going to get on after 3 turns. There's 156 turns here, so you know he's going to be on it almost from the start. And the thing that really impresses me or amazes me is the fact that he is driving a car he hasn't driven in practice, which shows the utmost faith in both his abilities and the crew's abilities to get that car ready.
To me, this was the story of the week. Despite the fact that everybody was going for the record, here was a guy without any practice time in this car, 118 miles an hour. They literally did 3 months of work in 3 days. And here he was, turning in a tremendous performance. Back at the starting line, Paul Dallenbach, the man who currently holds the record. Look at the intensity in those eyes as he is ready for his attempt. From Basalt, Colorado, the mark he set last year, 10:43.63, and here he comes. He had a horrible week in practice and qualifying.
Yeah, I talked to Paul before the start the day before, and he said they had all kinds of problems. They had a clutch problem, they had a poorly assembled motor, among others, but they really thought that they had it figured out before race day.
In the early going, there is engineer's corner. In the early going, he did look very good, and it would be an omen of things to come for Paul Dallenbach. Now remember, the speed trap through here, he was quicker than David Donner, up to 113 miles an hour. But believe me, you have not seen anything yet when it comes to top-end speed. Back at the starting line, this is Gary Lee Canoyer getting ready for his assault on the mountain. And what must be going through his mind? The veteran from Napomo, California, in an 81 Coyote. Just as David Donner had his moment this year at the mountain, this is last year. You've already seen it if you were with us from the beginning. The final turn, Gary Lee Canoyer goes over the edge. One more roll, he goes 2,000 feet further. He was not injured, but the question remains, when he approaches that corner this year, what will he be thinking about?
No, I'm just going to probably take a little easier through that corner, but the rest of the hill don't bother me one bit. I went up there and, tried to figure out exactly what happened this year, and there's just no way to explain what happened. It's just a racing accident.
Just a racing accident. I still never get over this part. These guys, when you talk about an accident, it's one thing. When you talk about rolling 2,000 feet down a mountainside, that's not just an accident.
That is not an accident. That's an event, actually, Marty. But that's the amazing thing about these guys. With all the danger here that's lurking around, they're still able to put that out of their mind and really focus on their driving.
Here is David Donner. Now, his split time will be the time to beat at this point because since he did not qualify, he was the first of the real fast open-wheel competitors to come past Glen Cove. Here is Gary Lee Canoyer, up to 120 miles an hour through the speed trap.
Yeah, he was really moving there, and you can see him through the corners. He's sliding a bit, trying to stay on that groove. Here's a look at the map to see where they're at.
David Donner approaching the finish line. Dallenbach close to Glen Cove, and Gary Lee Canoyer heading for the ski area. In fact, here comes Dallenbach. Time to beat, that is David Donner's on the left. The split time is 4:38.85, so he is quicker.
He is quicker, and Paul looked at me at breakfast the other day, and he said, you know what? I think my record's going to fall. I just hope I'm the one to set the new record.
This was the most incredible moment, as far as I'm concerned, leading up to the final 2 runs. Here he was, David Donner, making the last turn, and not only was he going to make it up the mountain, he broke the record by 3 seconds, which to me was simply incredible. And the drama was yet to build even further, because there is Robbie Unser pulling towards the starting line, and behind him, Rod Millen. Which one would claim the title, King of the Hill, at the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb? Stay with us. When we come back, the drama will continue to unfold. If you think the record's fallen, you ain't seen nothing yet. At the 72nd running of the Chevrolet Pikes Peak Auto Hill Climb, and you're looking at Paul Dallenbach. He held the record until just a few minutes earlier when David Donner had crossed the finish line, breaking it by 3 seconds, but Dallenbach himself would take it even lower.
There's Paul Dallenbach with a 10:27, and right at this time, I was at the top after seeing these 2 runs. I knew that what Robbie Unser and Rod Millen had in store would be really something special.
So the record had already dropped down to 10:27, and there is Gary Lee Canoyer shaking his head. He was experiencing some trouble at this point, trying to get horsepower out of his machine, and it would show at the finish line as he was nowhere close, as he waves, going frustratingly through the finish line in a time of 10 minutes 50 seconds. And there you're on board with Robbie Unser, the Conoco onboard camera system giving us some great views, and it's going to get even better once he puts the pedal down. So Robbie Unser will try and make it 34. That's 34 times that an Unser has won at least a division championship here at Pikes Peak. He qualified first in open wheel at 4:30.56. And there are his 3 victories in this class. And you're on board, and hold on.
I tell you, that is scary sitting here watching it from the monitor here. I know Robbie's really working hard. You can see him moving the wheel back and forth. But I think that Robbie won't be 100% pleased if he only wins the open wheel title. He wants the overall hill record back in the Unser family.
Well, the other thing that was interesting was how would he react after losing the Super Truck battle? And he took full blame for it. He said it was my fault. And this was about an hour and a half after running Super Truck that he was climbing behind the wheel and making another assault on the mountain. So the question of the mental side was there, and also the fact that Rod Millen was focused on his Unlimited while Robbie was having to split time between Super Truck practice and the Unlimited. He talked about it.
You got to remember that open wheeler's my sweetheart. I mean, that's my creation. I conceived it, you know, with Carson Smith and I. It's been in my brain for now since 1987, that concept of that car. So I know it, you know. It's not too hard for me to get into it and go pretty good. The thing is, Rod runs real well, and he has had more time to fine-tune the car. I do think we're about maxed out. I don't know if he has any left. If he does, then he could handle us. You know, the good thing about it is we're running an open wheel division with rules, and basically he ain't got none. So you know, my team can walk around holding their heads very high, the fact that they've got a car out there, and thankful enough to have a driver out there that can compete with something like that.
And you heard Robbie mention the fact that the Unlimiteds have no rules. Well, let's show you what Unlimited's all about.
Basically, Unlimited means just that. It must meet all safety precautions. Other than that, anything goes. The big difference on these cars is the aerodynamics. They have tunnels underneath the car and big wings. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
And this one has 4-wheel drive. That is Rod Millen's Toyota Celica. As the New Zealand transplant now calls Newport Beach, California home, stages his #2 Toyota, and that's the view you're going to get from the front of this car, and it is going to be a thrilling ride as we head for the starting line.
That is unbelievable right there. Right now he's at full song, probably close to 80 or 90 miles an hour already, and we're only 2 turns into it.
This is a 2.1 modified GTP motor, the same motor that Dan Gurney's team used to use in their IMSA prototype racing machines, which were devastating the last 2 years in IMSA competition before they were outlawed. And look at this car fly. Millen has won 3 different times, 3 different divisions.
Yeah, but the one thing that has eluded him is the overall title. He knows this is the year he can finally do it. And you see the in-car. Another thing, they've really brought in all the right people for this car. They brought in a fellow by the name of Lee Dykstra to do the aerodynamics. He's the one that was behind the Jaguar GTP day. And look at the top speed there, 128 miles per hour, way faster than Robbie.
And this was what the battle was about all week long. They talked about the fact that Rod had the straight line speed with the 4-wheel drive, but that he gave up a lot in the corners. But boy, right at this point, he looks so good.
One of the characteristics of Rod Millen is he is such a smooth driver. You don't think he's really going, and then you look at your stopwatch and you see that he's gotten everyone covered.
There's Robbie Unser as he's heading for Glen Cove. Rod Millen has made it through the halfway picnic grounds and is streaking towards the ski area. And here comes Robbie Unser. The time to beat on the left is 4:38.85. That's Dallenbach's time, and 4:29.85. And this reminds me of last year. Remember, he was on a record run until he got up into the W's. The motor was too lean. The motor blew up.
Yeah, I'm sure that they've solved whatever problem they had last year, but you never know what problems will crop up. But right now, Robbie Unser looks like he is definitely going to set a mark that Rod will have to shoot for. We'll be right back right after this.
Auto Hill Climb, the battle is joined. Robbie Unser is heading into the W's. Rod Millen is heading for Glen Cove and the halfway mark on this 12.42-mile layout. And the time to beat is Unser's on the left. 4:29.85. Is he going to do it? Yes! 4:26.66. So the Toyota of Rod Millen running quicker than he did in qualifying.
Is quicker in qualifying. He's on a very good pace. We know it's going to be a good finish. But one thing I want to bring up about the Toyota team, you hear Toyota, you think it's a Japanese car company. However, this is a very American effort. As Americans you're going to get. We have Jack Auld from Rod Millen Motorsports, Drino Miller from TRD, based in Southern California, John LaPlante, the designer of the car, who went to MIT, and you have Rod Millen living in Southern California. This is one American team versus another American team.
And right now, the battle is joined. Just sit back and enjoy this. four-wheel drive excitement. Now back with Robbie Unser. He's heading for the top of the W's, and he has got it all hanging out at this point. He has not made any mistakes on this open wheel run. Pitches it in, powers it down.
Yeah, Robbie Unser does not know what it means to hold anything back. He is always on the limit every time he gets into a race car, and he knows he has to be that way if he's going to unseat Rod Miller.
On board again with Robbie as we head towards the top of the mountain. Can he do it? Can he bring home the overall record to the Unser family? There's a book called Unser's Mountain. They've won so many championships up here. In fact, it's a love-hate relationship between the Unsers and the fans of this event. They either love them to death or they just want to see them lose every single time. Here comes Millen, heading for the W's as well.
You can see how smooth that car looks through there. Much of that's the aerodynamics, the wind or the air going over the car, really sticking it to the ground. We talked about the top speed advantage. The open wheels have a little bit of advantage in the corners, so it really makes for a real close battle.
You saw somebody holding out a card there. That was one of the pit crew members trying to tell Rod where he was on the race course in relationship to Robbie.
Yeah, Rod said he did know how he was doing the whole time, but nonetheless, he still couldn't hold anything back. Here, once again, we're inside Robbie's car. You see him really working the wheel. The tires are starting to go away a little bit. The altitude's getting thinner. Some of the problems we talked about before are starting to crop up.
At this point, he is well past the place where he broke last year, so obviously the motor is holding up very well at this point. Gets a little wide there. The time to beat on the left is Paul Dallenbach's 10:27.24, and Robbie Unser, the finish line just around this corner. He is going to shatter that mark, 10:05.85. So Robbie Unser has won the Open Division for 1994. Will he hold on to the overall? Rod Millen is still on the race course. Dallenbach, Donner, all breaking the existing overall mark. Let's go to Victory Lane where Bart caught up with Robbie Unser.
Good. Okay, standing here with Robbie Unser. 10:05.05, shatters the track record. Beat Dallenbach by over 20 seconds. You got to be happy. You finally got the overall track record here.
Well, not yet. We still got to wait for Rod coming up. We should have balanced my tires. I had a terrible vibration coming up, but man, that was better.
So tell me, was the track fast? You think Rod can do it?
Oh, the track fast. Problem is, there's some places where it ain't. So he's going to have his hands full. But
any scary moments out there?
Not in this one. The truck was a little different, but no, my hat's off. I hope we pulled it off for ADT. Mike Richardson, Bob McDivitt, Nick Caluso are all here. Really proud to have them. Chevrolet, I goofed up the first time. I knew it was my fault, and I really wanted to redeem it. And they've all just supported me tremendously, and my hat's off to them. Ted Naiman and everybody at Conoco has just been like so supportive, and you know, we had a bad luck in the truck, and they all said don't worry about it, and they're all still up. We've done a good job. The team looks good, the cars look good, and I think we have something we're going to get going good. So
the only question left to answer is, can the man behind the wheel of this Toyota break the overall record? We'll find out right after this. The moment of decision has arrived. Rod Millen has a time of 10:05.85 to beat. That's the mark set by Robbie Unser. At this point, he does not know what Robbie's time is. And at this point, he is just seconds away as he is about to make it to the last corner. The time on the left is Unser's. The time on the right is Rod Millen's. Will the mark fall for the fourth time today? Yes! 10:04.06 as Millen in the Toyota stood everyone on its ear at 14,110 feet above sea level. Take a look at the record breakers today, starting with David Donner in what is still the most incredible story of the entire week. Paul Dallenbach, nothing to be ashamed of there. He lowered his mark from 10:43 to 10:27. Robbie Unser at 10:05. And this man, Rod Millen, as he stands on top of that Toyota, and with the air so thin, be careful, Rod, you might run out of oxygen and pass out. He has one happy driver. 12 years it has taken him to reach this goal as he makes his way towards Bart Kendall. Bart, it's all yours.
All right, you see Rod Millen getting congratulations from Paul Dallenbach. Rod Millen, 10:04, you beat Robbie by a second. The new record holder here at Pikes Peak, how's it feel?
That was fantastic. The Toyota just ran great. The BF Goodrich tires were great. You know, my crew did a fantastic job. We ran out of brakes before Devil's Playground, so I had to baby it from there on. but it wasn't too bad. The car was fabulous.
Tell you guys are throwing down the gauntlet. It's gone from Chevrolet back to Toyota, and I'm sure they're going to come back strong next year.
You know, isn't that great? That's what motorsports or any sport's supposed to be like. A fabulous group of drivers. You know, I've had the time of my life here this week.
When you crossed the finish line, did you think you'd done it?
I got aboard at Glen Cove. I was down 5 seconds. I got aboard at the top of the W's there. I was up a second, so I left it down a little longer from there.
I don't know if we will ever see another performance like we witnessed today. You truly have been a part of auto racing history. 4 drivers lowered the record a total of 39 seconds. And it truly has become Millen's Mountain, at least until July 4th next year in 1995, when everyone again will assemble at Pikes Peak to determine who is King of the Hill. For Bart Kendall, I'm Marty Reed. For 1994, the King of the Hill is that man, Rod Millen. We'll see you next time we go racing on ESPN Speed World.